Sometimes life is yikes.
And that's okay. You're not alone. Welcome to Yikesland.
How are you doing, friends? I'm your host, Jelani, Huynh, along with hosts.
Kris, Fung.
We're here presenting a brand new podcast presented by the Pop Samurai Network, and it is called, what is it called, Kris?
Yikesland.
Yikesland. And it is a podcast that really, at the heart of it, is about depression and anxiety, but casting it in a light where it can be talked openly and it can be talked freely and be accepted as a normal thing. I deal with depression. Kris, I don't know about you. Where do you deal with it?
Oh, I'm a sad girl.
Sad girl. We're here bringing this podcast to you as a conversation and a way to connect with people out there who may have it, who may be dealing with some sort of mental health problem, and we want to be able to discuss it with you guys out there and also make you understand that while what you deal with is solely unique to you, you are not alone. There are many people out there, and there are people like myself and Christina here who are dealing with it on a daily basis, and this is what we're doing here. So welcome. Kris, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'm a little tired this morning because this is the period of my day where usually my depression is the worst, but here I am in front of you guys.
Oh boy, this is exactly what we want to do: presenting the depression in its whole, in its grandeur, if you will. I wanted to start off the podcast kind of like giving like updates of like stuff we're dealing with presently. So, I mean, of course, everyone asks a person who's sad or depressed or dealing with anxiety is, how are you doing, right? Or are you okay? You know, and that's the key thing of like, well, yeah, I'm okay, or I'm fine. You know, that's what we usually say. But since we have this podcast, I kind of want to get into like, has something happened recently, or if like you had any bouts that like really recently stand out to you?
Well, I guess I'll talk a little bit more about what I said a second ago, which is that I call it, I've suffered from depression for a long time, for as long as I can remember. But recently, in the last year or so, I've been calling it depression because I'm just really sad during the day. Like, it's super hard to get out of bed in the morning. By nighttime, I'm usually okay. Like, I seem like a normal person. But this is definitely the period in my day where I would normally be lying in bed being like, get up, get up, get up, get up. So it's not necessarily that anything happened to me or happens in the morning. That's just sort of the cycle in my day that it goes where I'm like, you need to get up, you need to go to work, you need to be a person.
Yeah, you need to be a functioning person. And like for me, I've been dealing with depression for quite some time, and as you guys are wondering, it probably was like, oh, what's your guys' backgrounds? We're gonna get to that, and that's probably like the kind of the crux of like the early episodes of this podcast of where we started out and where we think how it led to the present day. But for me, I believe, for me, I've been dealing with depression for quite some time, and I've done a good job of hiding it, I think, or most people who deal with our kind of disorder or, you know, illness or disease, if you will, usually have the mask, I like to call it, where they put on like the happy face and they put on the, oh, I'm a functioning adult, but behind closed doors or by myself, left to my own devices, I fall apart, you know. And for me, recently, I had an episode during a weekend where literally I was kind of paralyzed for the weekend. I could not muster the energy to do anything, and it was really hard, you know. I found myself just kind of just laying on, you know, my bed and just not being able to process the day and not being able to get up, even though in my mind I'm like, oh, you have stuff you need to do. You really should get up. You have people you should go see, or you should get out of your own area. But it was one of those weekends where for a couple days I literally slept throughout the whole weekend and did absolutely nothing, and it paralyzed me. And that's an episode for me where I just get, paralyzed and debilitated, and it's something I deal with every now and then. And of course, there's the constant like, oh, getting up, or I should be an adult. I need to get up and not adult, but I should be a person. I should be a functioning person. I shouldn't just be paralyzed all the time. But that's that's what the disease does. It paralyzes you, correct? I mean,
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, even though we know, especially for those of us that have done, therapy and stuff like that, and sort of done our research about depression, that that's not a helpful way to talk to yourself, where you're like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you getting up? But you still do it anyway. I don't know if you experience that as well.
Yeah. And like for people out there who may be dealing with it, or may think that they deal with it, or even for the people who quite don't understand it and are listening to us here, for people who deal with the disease in question, it sometimes even the smallest task can seem daunting to us, and even a roadblock or a simple little bump in the road of life can send us spiraling down a whole whirlwind of like self, hate and self destruction, like, I don't know, like a simple just like, oh, I was driving and I got a flat tire, and now now I have to buy a new tire, and like that's a whole thing, and everyone, like, you get paralyzed by it. It's like, well, now I got to figure out how to pay for this tire, and I figured out how I'm going to do this, and it's just like it's a whole whirlwind of things. And it was just like, oh, you got a flat tire, and that's something like that, where it's like something so simple, and it doesn't really even have to be your fault. But at the same time, when it happens, people who are like us, where we're crippled by something so small and so, minuscule like that, it becomes a thing. I mean, for you, do you find yourself like hit with roadblocks a lot with like something that like even in other people's eyes is very like that doesn't really matter? It's fine. It's a really small thing, but like for you, it becomes like a heavy thing.
Oh, definitely. I think, and part of the difficulty with that is, so at this point in my life, I've been depressed for so long that a lot of my friends tend to also either be depressed now or have suffered from depression in the past. So there's sort of more understanding when I say I'm not able to do this thing, and it's something that sounds really simple and seems like, well, why don't you just fix it? That's such an easy fix. And it's like, yeah, it sounds like an easy fix, but for some reason, something in my brain isn't letting me do it. And so this thing that sounds very simple to somebody who is, I don't want to say normal, because this is my normal, but somebody who doesn't have depression and anxiety and stuff like that, something that would be simple for them is hard for me. And so then it's difficult for me because I have two voices in my head. I have the voice that knows what depression is and how it functions, and is like, it's okay that you're really anxious about this thing and that you can't do it. Yeah. That's normal for you, and like, you can get over it, but I'm not blaming you for not being able to get over it right now. And I have the other voice in my head that's the voice of other people, and my self-critical voice that's like, what is wrong with you? This is a thing that a regular person could do. And I will use that kind of, the term regular person or the term normal person, to almost hurt myself, where I would never say that to anybody else. And I don't think that about other people at all.
Yeah. And like, again, with the key goal, with depression, it is a disease, and it's key goal for us is we want to try to get better, right? And that's I think that's, if you had cancer, it's like, well, yeah, the key goal is like, I want to get better. Or if you have some sort of sickness, you want to get better from it. And for us, like, depression is going to be something that it's going to be a constant in our lives, and it's going to be a thing that it's a constant fight, and it's almost as whether we can cope with it or not, you know. And some people deal with it worse than others, and some people lead down darker roads than others, and a lot of people start in different places, you know. I guess we could jump into kind of backstories, I guess, or depression superhero backstories, origin stories, I guess, if you will, out there. I'll start off here, so that way we build up to you eventually. But for me, hi, Jelani Huynh. I am 29 years old, and I deal with depression. I've dealt with it for a good chunk of my life. I would say going into my teenage years, it really started to take hold. And first off, I gotta say, before I get into my story and everything like that, and everything that happened in the past, I'm gonna say this: I don't have any hate for anybody. I don't dislike any of my family or anything like that. I can't. It's just not. It's not part of me. You know, I can't be that type of person that just hates somebody. You know, for long times and stuff like that. You know, I may feel slighted by somebody, or I may feel some anger towards somebody, but at the end of the day, I can't hate someone. And I'm gonna try and make this as easy as possible, and I'm gonna get into some personal stuff. And if there's family listening, know that I love you all, you know. And this is just, I feel like it's something I need to get out there, and maybe it could help someone else out there. So my family, I'm the eldest. I have a brother and a sister, and I am from a family of a Hispanic, Mexican mother, and a Cambodian father. My father came over from Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge incident there in Cambodia, the killing fields. If you guys, you know, look it up with Pol Pot and everything like that, it was basically just genocide of, you know, a whole, you know, culture and people, and it was hell. And he was over there during his childhood, and he witnessed a lot of things over there. And this is kind of the thing where it's like I don't blame him for anything that's happened, but I know that he deals with some stuff as well. But that's for some other days, you know. Growing up, you know, my father, as he's told us, never really had a father. And so it was almost like having someone who is dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and also didn't know how to be a father at the same time, because he never had a father, right? And so growing up, I feel like I'm being the oldest, I took the brunt of a lot of anger issues and a lot of like issues that, you know, came from that. You know, it's common with people who deal with mental illness, like, you know, PTSD and stuff like that, and anger that comes with it. And it's a monster that you have to fight with every single day. And I know that he struggles with it, and I took a brunt of that. And so you can imagine that, you know, growing up in, you know, here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, that's where we're from. Podcast is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so based here. Like, it was just a weird childhood growing up, and dealing with the anger and, you know, the kind of just like episodes every now and then of like outbursts. And it became a thing where it's like, man, you know, he's so angry all the time, and sometimes it's directed at me. Am I, you know, does he hate me? You know, am I, you know, worthless, as sometimes he gets angered enough to say, am I, not good enough to be around, and slowly as I get into the older age and going into teenager age, the hormones as you progress into teens, you start lashing out too. And there came arguments and fights and issues that came with the whole relationship with my father. And so with that, I felt that I was dealing with, just sadness and not wanting to do the things that I really enjoyed, and not kind of wanted to isolate myself. And so even though I had some of the best friends in the world growing up, I felt like I was still just in just a world of just gray and just darkness. And it was like I couldn't, like, it felt numb, if that makes sense. I don't know. So that was like a lot of my whole crux of like the younger age, and just how that laid the foundation of like what would be today. Just constantly in my own mind, where it's like, I don't deserve this, or I don't deserve happiness, or I don't deserve, like, I'm not good enough, and that's a constant voice that's in my head, like the voice that you deal with. It's, I have a voice that wants to self-destruct, and I almost do try to do that, I guess, on a subconscious level, where it's like I make decisions purposely to try and self-destruct my life, because I don't think I deserve it. I don't think I'm happy. I don't think that, I'm good where I am at, because I don't deserve to be here, and that was, kind of a hard thing for a while. So, I mean, that is something that I still deal with today. For me, I mean, we'll keep going back into my past as time goes on, but when I first realized that, or came to grips with, like, I really need to get help, I really need to figure out what's going on, I went to my primary doctor, let them know that I was in a very dark place, and I was contemplating some very dark things, and I got very scared of what could happen, and they told me that it sounds, I don't want, they were like, I don't want to jump the gun and just like label everything from what you're telling, but I believe that you are dealing with depression, and for a long time, I guess from that point until I was, and it's funny because being 29, I had that told to me when I was 28, and so I knew I was dealing with this for a long period of time, right? And I knew that there was this issue and this darkness that I had in my life, and I just never like accepted it. But when it got to a point where it got really bad, I needed to go get help. And then when I talked to someone and they said those words, it almost kind of broke me down a little bit, where it's like, I didn't want to believe it, and I kind of just wanted to believe that I was, I don't know, I was in an emo phase or something like that. I didn't want to believe that I was, I guess in my mind, and the voices that that swirl around is, I guess, broken. Where I was, the word depression is not really talked about a lot, and it's not really, the mental health. Mental health is probably one of the largest subjects of things that are not really talked about in the open, and so when you hear the words of like you're dealing with depression, even though you've known the whole time, deep down it's like, yeah, that's makes sense. Hearing someone say it, and hearing especially a medical professional say it, it's like, well,
sort of brings it into reality.
It brings it into reality, and then that's where it really just breaks you down. And after they were like, I'm gonna go check some stuff out and get some stuff together. And doctor left the room, and I started to cry there, and it was like hearing something that you kind of knew the whole time, but making it real. It's almost like it was almost like, and again, I don't want to like compare it to other diseases all the time, but it's almost as if you knew deep down that you had some tumor or something like that, and it was going to be the cause of like much strain in your life, and it was always going to be there, and to have someone confirm it for you, which like you knew and you felt it, and it was in your body, and at the same time, when you hear someone say it, the severity of it and the reality of it like really hits you, and then it's like, kind
Yeah.
of just makes it real, I guess.
Well, it sort of brings it into a different plane where I feel like I had a sort of similar experience where once you start talking about it, it becomes now a thing that you have to deal with, where before it was something that you knew was a thing, but was kind of part of your own personal mental hell, where sometimes you felt like, oh, maybe nobody knows. And that's probably not true, because you sometimes are going to seem outwardly sad or outwardly angry or just, strange, because depression changes your personality. But once you start talking about it, it's like, okay, now somebody in the real world knows, and now I'm going to have to do something about this and start treating it like it's real.
Yeah, and like for me, when I was again going back to the past and things that I dealt with, I felt like I couldn't be around like my family, and I couldn't be around everybody because I wanted to isolate myself as much as possible. But of course, being a kid, like I didn't have that kind of option. I mean, I was the eldest of three, and so I kind of ran away from the whole situation where I decided to move out and live with a grandparent for a while. And even though that's still living with family, it wasn't the normal family I had.
And it's a separate move.
And it's a separate, it's a separate place, and there's distance. And, everyone kind of always said, it's like, oh, you got to make up with your dad and this and that, or you got to make up with the family. And it wasn't really the hate or anything like that. I mean, there might have been at that time some anger towards him, but it was more of, I didn't think that I deserved the normal life that I had there, which was the family, the mother, the loving mother, and the father, and being the eldest of two other siblings. And I didn't think that I was good enough to fit in that role, and I decided that, again, making a decision to self-destruct my life, I decided to, tear myself away from that family. And for a while, staying with, the grandparents and being separate from that situation, and that was more of the reasoning why. I mean, I think a lot of my family think that at that time that I kind of just was rebelling and just like got into a huge argument and just like, what, I don't want to be here anymore because, I don't want to, be here because of, issues with my dad or something like that. No, I mean, I love my family. I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my brothers and my brother and sister. It's just, when you're dealing with this whole, disease that we have, especially the one for me that I know that I have, it wants to self-destruct. It wants me to self-destruct, and it thinks, for me, the voice in my head is, you don't deserve it, right? And you don't deserve normalcy. So tear yourself out of normalcy, and it was just kind of a problematic situation, where I being okay in school, but for a long time, kind of just like I deal with so much anxiety with it and so much, sadness that I get from the home life that I really just couldn't. I was very paralyzed when doing and focusing on school, So after a while, grades started to slip and things like that, and I really had at that time, especially in high school, I went to a local school. I mean, it was just like, oh, your neighborhood, here's your school, But it was a very bad school, and it wasn't. It was one of those schools where like, oh, there's a fight like once a week, and the school gets shut down at least twice, 2 or 3 times a week because something happened, And going to that school, that kind of threw more, I guess, fuel to the fire, where it's like dealing with just shitty school life and then going home and just feeling like I don't deserve to be in this home, at the same time, I've had wonderful friends from high school and the people I grew close with, and some of them I'm still very close friends with to this day, where some of them even still check up on me, see how I'm doing. Going through and the high school situation where there's fights and there's people who bully other people, and while I was in a decent group of friends where it's not like we really got bullied or anything like that, I still felt distant from everything, and at the same time just didn't feel like I fit in, and so it became an issue, I found solace in art at that time, and we had a pretty great art teacher, and I found myself really, and I think it happened through most high school and a lot of middle school, where I really found, in creativity, I found a lot of happiness and a little bit more where it's like the creative side of me felt at home, and so joining some art clubs and this and that, but at the same time, the voice does creep in after like a while when I'm helping out with murals and stuff and doing things like that, and eventually, everyone thinks, teachers thinks, oh, you should be going to like an art school or something like that, or you should be going, focusing on that, doing something creative, and the voice in my head creeps in and says I don't deserve it, and that's when I start self-destructing my creative side there, and eventually I distanced myself from the whole art scene, and to the point where some of the teachers were really worried about, like, hey, what's going on? You were doing really great with the art and creativity, and now you're shut yourself off. And I kind of just cleared myself off of it, where I just couldn't muster up the want to keep going with it, and I really had that's when it was like a really hard spot for me, where I distanced myself from everything, and I tore myself out of that, and that was kind of hard, where the couple things that I loved in my life, and discovering that I loved art and creativity, and realizing that this voice in my head is telling me that I can't do it, and it won't let me do it in my mind, and it's convincing me that to self-destruct it, to pull your life apart, that you don't deserve it, and that right there, that was an issue. But after a while, I started figuring out that I really loved creativity, and I couldn't pull myself away from it, as much as I wanted to, and as much as I did during that time, which, sucks because I could have done more, but, it happens the way it happens, you know. And slowly, I tried to do things that were in my creative wheelhouse, were things that really, you know, felt like I was really doing something creative, you know. And that's where my love of cooking and culinary arts came from, and that was the love of film and audio and the creation of certain products, like, you know, video games or you know, movies and TV, film, art. So it was just something where it's like all of this creative other things besides just paint and brushes, and I lost myself in really having an interest in that, but at the same time being pushed by family to really settle on like something that I should be doing with my life, you know. And I decided to tell everybody, it's like, you know, I wanted to do something culinary, you know. And from there I went to culinary school for a little bit. I went to a area technical college here in Milwaukee. It was not a great program for me when I went. The teacher at that time was focusing more on people who had really already experienced in restaurant business and who were really already working in restaurants, so they really focused on them. And for those of us who were striving to want to learn more, they distanced themselves from us. So it became very hard to keep up with that and you know, still work job and still deal with, you know, the voice in the head and the disease. And eventually it became a thing where when the culinary arts teacher told me, it's like, you probably should think of going into a different field, and the voice in my head saying, yeah, you shouldn't persevere in this, at the same time pulled myself out of that as well, and self-destructed myself out of that. And that's where, you know, it led to present day decisions and present day, you know, leading of lives, I guess. There's more future stuff, and that even gets even more heavier than that, but that's more kind of a you know, condensed version, I guess, if you will, of like what I dealt with, you know, realizing that throughout my childhood and teenage years, and of where I got this voice and this disease where, you know, it tells me that I don't deserve to be around. And for, you know, for people out there, I want to let you guys know that, like, I'm coping with it, you know, and I'm dealing with it. And it's not just all just me just wanting to self-destruct all the time. It's more of trying to figure out things and figure out ways to cope with it and deal with the monster that's inside you, and understand that it's going to be there and it's going to be a fight, but it's more about, you know, trying to persevere and get better, you know, to a point where today I want to get up, and today I want to do something, and today I want to make a new podcast, you know. For you, I mean, how do you feel about, like, how do you help yourself go through the days?
Well, I was just going to say something about you were talking about the voice a lot, and I think that really resonates with me and probably resonates with a lot of people. And sometimes I think of it as running from kind of a monster or zombies, where sometimes they're going to catch up to you, and you're going to have to turn around and you're going to have to fight them. And sometimes they're just behind you, and you know that they're behind you all the time, and you just have to run faster than them.
Yeah.
But I think it also gives people like us strength that other people who aren't dealing with that don't have to have, where we have to be brave enough and strong enough to keep running from that, or to turn around and fight it when we have to. And that kind of, to me, is its own superpower.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for you, you go through, I mean, you deal with it on a daily basis as well. For you, is it more just it being paralyzing to you, where it's like the normal, like again, like you said, the mornings are the issues where you have to really will yourself out of it? Are there other like roadblocks that it throws in your way besides that, or is it more just like it just wants to paralyze you?
I think, I mean, right now the biggest thing is the depression, but the voice is always there, even later at night when I'm kind of at my happiest or my highest functioning. You know, the voice is still there, and it's sometimes I forget to listen to it, but it's always going to be there, and you learn ways of coping with it and ways of talking to it and ways of telling it to F off, but it's kind of always there, at least as a self-doubt. And what you were talking about earlier about the voice sort of telling you to self-destruct and telling you that you don't deserve to do the things you love, and almost telling you not to love them, whether that also is very real to me, where it will try to separate, your depression will try to separate you from your passions and also from even people that you love.
Yeah.
Where it tries to distort your reality and say, well, you're not even good at this thing. You don't even like it that much. You don't love the people that you love. And like, you're not allowed to have anything, kind of. I don't know if that's a feeling that you have, where it's like, I'm going to take everything away from you. And so that's, I guess, my struggle now in just being sort of, because I guess at this point in my life, and it has not always been this way, I'm a very high functioning depressed person.
Yes.
Where a lot of people that meet me would think that I'm not depressed, especially if you meet me later in the day.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of also why I tend to talk about my depression a lot. Because I almost don't want people to think that, oh, I'm normal, I'm not dealing with anything, because I want it to be real for other people who are struggling with depression and anxiety, that you can look normal, but inside have that horrible voice and be very sad. And that's okay, it's neutral. It's not, you're not better than people who are not high functioning, you're not worse than them. It's just sort of a different experience, or a experience that you're currently going through. You know, and I tend to be subconsciously attracted to, not just like romantically, but platonically as friends, other people who are depressed in my life. I think that at this point, it's just been so long that I end up accidentally cultivating a circle of other sad friends.
Yes. Yes.
That's how we're friends.
Yes.
But which is nice. But which, you know, not everybody has. And I think growing up, it can be very isolating when you don't really have the vocabulary or the understanding or the life experience to know that what you are feeling is depression, and let other people have it. And I was going to ask you if it was sort of an added isolation to be the older sibling in that situation.
I think it was. For me, I felt like I needed to kind of take the brunt of the, I guess if you would call it, you know, issues that happened in the household at that time. And I felt like I wanted to be the brother that like protected, you know, the siblings from harm and kept them from, you know, kept them happy at the same time. But even though I knew that ultimately I couldn't, and I probably let the voice in my head kind of tear myself away from them. And it's a situation. It's hard to describe, because when I want to be the great big brother to them and do things for them to ensure their happiness, ensure their success, and at the same time get this voice in my head that starts telling me that you're not good enough to be in this spot, and you're not going to be able to succeed as a big brother to, two great siblings. My tearing myself away from them and distancing myself away from them was an isolation of my own making. And being the older sibling, yes, it was kind of an isolating situation as well, because I didn't have someone to also turn to talk about this. It was more of, I was trying to be the greatest role model, if you will, or protector of my siblings I could be, but also knowing that I was going to ultimately fail at it. And it's hard because, I love all of my family. I love my father, I love my mom, and I love my brother and sister. It's just, with everything that I deal with on a daily basis with this depression, and I take antidepressants, and honestly, I don't really even know if they really work, because I have a problem with the voice that fights me taking those in a proper manner, because it's more of like, oh, are these going to actually do anything for you? Because you're useless and you're not going to be able to, they're not going to work right for you. And so it kind of wills me to not take them at all, so, but at the same time, I feel like for people out there who are dealing with it or coming to grips with dealing with it, it's a thing that's like, you should seek help, and whether it's not antidepressants or medication don't work for everybody. That's the sad truth. Like, they won't work for everybody, but there are many different types, and there might be one out there for you that can at least help you cope with it, because there's never a cure for this. It's not going to go away. It's going to be a thing where you're going to deal with it, and you're going to try to cope with it with your life. And eventually you'll understand that, like, it's something that's going to be there, and understand that you're not alone in this situation. There are many people out there. There are a lot of people who deal with it, and there are people who are dealing with it that would love to be your friend or in your life somehow. And for me, one of the things I feel so weird about, and I don't know if this is something that you do with at all, I feel like I'm really great at talking to other people and helping other people, but I can't help myself at all. I have some of the closest friends to me, and I have some of the greatest people in my life that I've met and that I've helped with and I've given advice to, and I can't take that advice that I give them for myself, even though it could apply wholeheartedly. I view myself as just broken, and I can't fix myself, but I feel like I can help someone else, and I feel like I have helped some people, and just being in their lives and just helping them along the way with what they deal with or what they were dealing with at that time, or in a situation that, where someone has an episode and someone needs help, and being there for them. I felt like I did a great job of doing that, but at the same time, I'm unable to help myself, and it's a tough thing, because a lot of people who deal with this have a problem with helping themselves, and sometimes there's even a denial, and I don't know if you deal with that at all.
Yeah, I feel like, I sort of use two different standards for me and other people, and maybe this is a little bit what you're talking about. But like, if I'm talking to a friend and they're having a hard time and they can't get out of bed, but they got up and they took a shower that day, I can easily look at that person and be like, oh my God, that's so strong that you got up and took a shower. I know exactly how hard that is. Like, you're incredible for getting up and doing that. But then if I'm doing that and I can't get up, but all I did that day was take a shower, I'm like, oh, you're worthless. You were supposed to do all these other things. And I And it's like I'm looking at that other person and I'm like, I truly feel like they're incredible for facing that. And then I'm in the same situation and I truly feel like I'm worthless for not doing better. And I don't know if you've also maybe are using sort of two different standards, one for the people that you love or that you care about or that you see are struggling with something, and then one impossibly harsh, very cruel standard for yourself that is just that horrible depression voice.
Yeah, I mean, mine is very similar, where I see people who are doing great or that are doing great in their lives or trying to get better, and it's like, wow, I'm really happy that you got yourself together and you're doing that. You're really making moves to to do that stuff, and at the same time, I put myself in the boat of like, yeah, you're not ever gonna get that. You don't deserve to get that. You're not going to be able to achieve that because you're useless. You're worthless. You're not going to be able to do it. And that's a voice that I have to deal with. And eventually there's some days where, like you said, there's some days where I can shrug it off, and there's some days where I can cope, and there's some days where I can move on, and then there are the days that are hard, and all you can do with this disease is take it one day at a time. But seeking help in some way is a great way of trying to cope with this. Finding someone else who or some other people who deal with it and talking with them. Even that can help. Therapy, I've heard is a great option. I personally haven't done it, but I know there are people out there who stand by it, and there are people who wholeheartedly believe that it's a way of coping with it. For me, I believe that one of the things that I've been bad at recently, but I believe that really helps me is distractions. I believe that losing myself in distractions has helped me cope with everything.
It gives you something to listen to that's not the voice.
Yeah, exactly. So really focusing on the podcasts that I run and the network and the things that I really want to pour my heart and soul into, even though the voice is telling me it's going to fail or it's not going to work. I've willed myself into understanding that this is a distraction and this is fun and this is something I want to do and this is something that I love doing, and so I'm not going to listen to the voice, and so I'm going to keep creating, right? And so that's what I've pushed myself into doing, and I want to keep doing it, and it becomes a distraction away from the voice. And every time I do a show with friends, with people I love, it usually helps me, and it usually gives me the drive and the energy to keep doing more things. And so I want to keep the distractions going, and I've been really bad about getting out of my from my own devices. I should be going out there, catching a movie, doing something, catching a show or something like that, because doing that distracts you away from it. Even listening to a song or something like that, music, it's a great distraction from it, and it's a great way of easing your mind. Even if you're listening to sad music or something like that, it's not being depressed. There have been studies that actually show that it actually does help to listen to something that really resonates with you at that time, more than just like, oh, I'm listening to this super happy song from Pharrell, he's super happy, and he can't relate to me right now, so it's not really working. But when you're listening to someone who is giving you very sad lyrics and very harsh lyrics, and it resonate with you at that time, studies have shown that really helps you actually feel better, because you can relate to it. It's like, oh, I know what you're going through when you made the song, or I understand, What about you? I mean, do you have anything that really distracts you away from the voice or the disease, if you will?
I definitely will watch a lot of movies especially when things get bad. I kind of know, okay, if I have time, I'm going to watch this favorite TV show, even if it's one I've seen a million times, or I'm going to go see a movie by myself. If I have time to kind of do that, if I have like the time and the strength to do that self-care, I will, because I know that sitting in a movie theater in the dark, just eating popcorn and watching a movie will take me out of my life for a little bit. And even though that's, that's escapism, that's fine. Like anything that whatever it is that you're doing that's keeping you alive another day, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, I think that's great. And the more things you can find that help you like that, the better. And then for me, and this is probably a little bit unhealthy, that is why I obsessively work so much, because that's sort of what gives me purpose right now, and is like, all right, well, you have to get out of bed because you have to go to work because people are depending on you at work.
Yeah.
For me, it's a staff of about 30 people that are relying on me to come in and make things function. And so I have to make it function for them, even if I wouldn't have been able to make it function for myself. So at this point in my life, that's the main sort of distraction for me, and the main thing that like helps me run from the monsters is just working, because I know that it's productive, like it's doing something, and it's doing something for other people, where in a way that sort of sidesteps the question of, am I able to do this for myself? Like, do I deserve this? It's not even a question. It's, I'm going to do this because other people deserve this. And ultimately, I'd like to get to the point where I am doing stuff all the time that's because I think I deserve it, because I'm quieting the voice, and I'm like, nope, like I deserve the things that I say that other people deserve. But right now I'm not at that point right now. I'm doing stuff for other people, and that's okay. I'm not going to I can't blame myself for not being at the place that I want to be. And that's something that I haven't always felt that way, but I think you were talking about therapy earlier. And that's one of the things that I did. I'm not currently in therapy, but you sort of learn different ways of talking to yourself. And so what therapy has done for me is that I have learned ways of talking to myself that are a little bit kinder than what my natural instinct, given the depression voice, is trying to get me to say to myself. And so being able to look at myself and be like, whatever place that you're at, it's okay. Whatever you were able to do that day, it's okay. I am sometimes able to sort of pull that voice from the void that I learned in therapy, and almost you pretend that you're another person. You pretend that you're your own therapist, and you speak kindly to yourself. And that can also help fight the monster voice that's saying you're terrible and you're worthless.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as for folks out there, I mean, I just want to make sure that you guys understand that, like, we're here, we're talking about it, and we're going to be open about it. And sorry if it's kind of a heavy episode with like my backstory and everything like that. A little bit, half of my backstory. There's another half to it, but I just want to let you guys know that we cope with it, and at the same time, we find also, I guess, kind of humor in it, kind of a little bit. I mean, we kind of really understand that, like, at the same time, it's kind of nuts that we feel this way, and there are people that feel this way at the same time. But I mean, even though we feel alone, and it's one of the weirdest things about this disease is that it's the only disease where it feels like everyone has it, but you feel alone anyways, because like for us, like you said, it's like, oh, you feel like, oh, I'm always attracted to groups of people that like have it as well, and they'll be in my circle of friends, or they'll, be significant others. We're usually attracted to like other people who are also like have this disease as well, and somehow, I don't know if it's on a subconscious level or if it's just the disease itself, understanding like, hey, you're a sad person as well. How are you? And I've met some of the closest people to me, understanding that I realize that I resonate with them, and I know that they are on some sort of level of, unhappiness as well, or some state of this disease as well. And there's many different versions of this. I mean, here you have two different versions, but there are some people who have, high energy, and that's when you have a manic depressive person, and that's when you have people who have OCD and deal with that. Also, there are many different ways, and there are people who have crippling anxiety where they have anxiety attacks, and there are many different versions of this, and at the same time we're all coping with it together, and we're all moving together. We're all depressed together, if you will. I guess as a final question for the end to cap off this episode here, we came up with the name Yikesland. Why Yikesland?
So Yikesland, I think you were talking about finding humor in depression earlier, and that's something that for me is really important, and I know for a lot of other people is really important. My friends are like that too, where we make jokes about being depressed all the time. And I know that doesn't work for everybody, but for me and the people that I tend to be friends with, finding the absurdity in depression is hilarious, because it's just like you're living in this sort of bizarro world where everything is bad all the time, and it feels like everything's on fire and you're living in your own personal hell. But it's kind of comical how bad things can be and how bad the voices can be. And if you can kind of step outside that and look at it, you're like, that's actually really silly that you're living in this world where you look at everything and everything is yikes. Like you're looking through yikes colored glasses. Exactly. Where everything seems bad. And so Yikesland is kind of a reclaiming of the humor that it is to be living in your own depression world, where you're like, everything is just bad and I don't know why. It's not supposed to be that way. But it's just like this hilarious amusement park of disaster.
Yeah, and that's Yikesland in a nutshell. Thank you guys for joining us here. I appreciate you guys. We're going to end off the episode here with a couple in-house keeping things. This show has been brought to you by the Pop Samurai Network. It is a network that I created where trying to create a community of nerdy, geeky friends to come together. And so we have a bunch of nerdy, geeky shows that you can find more information on at popsamurainetwork.com. So we appreciate you guys joining us here. If you could like, subscribe, share, leave us, some great reviews. And if you guys have any questions or, things like that you'd like to talk to us about, and we'd love to communicate with you guys as well, you guys can send an email to us at popsamurainetwork@gmail.com. And we'd love to talk to you guys. If you're looking for someone to talk to, we're open to it, and we'd love to talk to you as well, and really communicate with you guys out there. The reason behind us starting this podcast is to really get the normalizing of the discussion of mental health and understanding that you are not alone out there. And if this show affects one person and realizing that they're not alone, we have succeeded on some level, I think. Just get out there, try to find people who are dealing with the disease as well, same as you. If you can't, and if you're in a real dark spot, please call the National Suicide Hotline. You can call them at 1-800-273-8255. So please just understand that there's always help available to you. For people out there who are dealing with this. You have any final thoughts you'd like to get out there?
I'm just excited to be with you guys and kind of have this community. Again, I've never done a podcast before, and so to me, it's like, even if nobody ever saw this helps me to be talking about things. Yeah. And I feel less alone sitting here with Jelani, talking with a friend. Yeah. Really in a sort of intimate and fearless way about what it is honestly like on a daily basis to deal with depression. And I'm thinking about if anybody, watches this or listens to this, what it would be like for me to see somebody else talking that way. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to bring to this. But I'm excited to be here with Jelani. I'm excited to be here with Pop Samurai, and I appreciate you guys listening.
All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been your host, Jelani Huynh, along with host
Kris Fung.
We love you out there, and thank you for joining us, and we'll be back with you guys next week. See you later.